What's up everyone, this is Lord Brodyark back with another Final Fantasy XIV video. Today I want to talk about 14's gearing systems, their problems, and how I'd address them. Before we begin, I'll explain the current system of gear, to catch those who perhaps play more casually up to speed. The gearing treadmill begins at or around the beginning of each Savage release. Using a combination of normal difficulty raid drops, crafted gear, and extreme trial drops, you can assemble a gear set for use within Savage raids. This part of the system is not really of much concern to us as there isn't really that much of an issue here. However, the gear drop from Savage raids is always the maximum currently attainable gear level, tied with gear purchased with tomestones, which are then upgraded with materials also found in Savage raids. These are the two best-in-slot sets that exist within each raid tier, and a best-in-slot set will be a mix of the two sets. So what's the problem here? You can just farm the gear and materials from Savage and farm out tomestones to get the gear you need, right? Yeah, so that's not actually how that works. Unfortunately, there are restrictions on how you can get loot for these higher level raids. You only have one shot at getting loot every week for each Savage raid, even if you get nothing. Not only that, but the tomestones required for gearing have a weekly cap, preventing you from getting any more once reached. Now, I do understand why this system exists. There are two main purposes behind time gating these resources: preserving a feeling of progression for the raid tier, and getting people to play the tier longer. I understand that these are things the developers desire. However, the way they're implemented raises a lot of issues. These time restrictions last far too long. As it stands now, the current raid tier remains weekly restricted for the vast majority of its lifetime, only being unlocked about a month before the next set of raids drop, and the tomestone cap never is removed. I'm sorry, brothers. The restriction is unnecessary by then. This issue also raises another problem when ultimates are thrown into the equation. Ultimate raids require you to have the best available gear possible to even progress through them, let alone clear. So what happens if I don't have the gear I need for an ultimate? What happens if I'm planning to swap roles for the ultimate? If I don't get very lucky on gear drops, it could be months before I have the gear I need. So how would I fix this? First of all, I would remove both the Savage lockout system and the Tomestone lockout on the next major patch. For example, for the Cruiserweight tier from 7.2, the lockouts would be removed in 7.3. Not only is this more reasonable, it also allows raiders a week to farm out everything they need for the upcoming ultimate. I would also take the existing book pity system and reduce the cost of purchasing gear. Accessories should cost 2 books, hats, gloves, and boots should cost 3, and chest pieces, leggings, and weapons should cost 4. I'm gonna be honest guys, the current 8 books for one weapon is insane. That's 2 months for one weapon out of over 20, compared to only 7 gear sets for every other left side piece and only 5 for accessories. Weapons should be easier to get than other gear, not harder. But I think 4 books is a fair compromise. Is that it for the fixes then? You fixed everything you said was an issue. Not quite. Raiders aren't the only people who play this game after all. In the major patch after a raid tier, 7.3 being an example, we already get an upgrade for crafted gear and new Alliance gear from the Alliance raid, both being 10 levels below best in slot and available for non-raiders. Upgraded crafted gear is fine as it is, but Alliance gear could use some changes. For some reason, Alliance gear is weekly locked, but also an entire 10 item levels below best in slot. Either make Alliance raid gear into best in slot gear that's easy to obtain but weekly locked, or keep it below Savage gear and remove the limit on gearing. I prefer the latter option myself, but I would accept either. And that's about it for changes I'd make. I know some out there want there to be more meaningful changes such as more best-in-slot gear sets to mix and match, or to have gear be more than near stat increases, but today I wanted to focus on the issue of obtainability specifically. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.